the state of Florida continues its descent into fascism with a new bill that would actually violate the First Amendment, specifically the freedom of the press. So now let's go to Republican Senator Jason Brodeur, who has introduced a bill requiring that bloggers, yes, he's targeting bloggers, that just happen to write about Governor Ron DeSantis, his cabinet, or state legislators to register with the state. If they do not, they will be fined by the government until they register with the state authority. So, Florida, don't have to register, when you have a gun, but if you have a blog that may be critical of Ron DeSantis or any members of his cabinet or administration or any Florida Republican officials, you are automatically in very, very dangerous in the eyes of the DeSantis administration. We must crack down and we must register you. Wow. All right, so now more details, of course. Again, it would require them also to disclose if anybody happens to be paying them for their posts about certain elected officials and how much they are getting paid for said posts. Again, note certain elected officials. Gee, I wonder which officials. Now, the penalties if you do not register, which would result in a fine of $25 a day. And the penalty would be capped at $2,500 per post, according to NBC affiliate WFLA of Tampa. The bill says the blogger's reports to the state must include the individual or entity that compensated the blogger for this blog post and the amount of compensation received from the individual or entity, and defines a blog as a website or web page that hosts any blogger and is frequently updated with opinion, commentary, or business content. Again, literally taking aim at free speech. Amazing. Now, notably, the term blog does not include the website of a newspaper or other similar publication. So, look, this is wildly unconstitutional. I think it's, glaringly obvious that this would never pass constitutional muster. How could they not know that? Well, they do know that. They do know that, but they do not care. This is all an effort to shut down any critical media of Ron DeSantis or any Republican official. I do not believe that it would ever be applied to, anyone who is critical of Democrats. No, of course not. And I'll give you more details, by the way, of the irony of this entire situation. But let's get to Brodeur, who talked to the website Florida Politics. And here's a reasoning. He said, quote, "Paid bloggers are lobbyists who write instead of talk. They both are professional electioneers. If lobbyists have to register and report, why shouldn't paid bloggers?" It's called freedom of the press. They're not the same as lobbyists. You guys literally out there comparing people who write opinion pieces in blogs to corporate lobbyists. That is insane. Ridiculous. No, look, again, the aim is very simple: to shut down independent media voices who are not, by the way, corporate media. And therefore, of course, these independent journalists, independent bloggers, commentators, whatever, they have to be harder to control than mainstream press, who are very, very concerned about access, by the way. And look, this is also, by the way, part of the DeSantis push to expand the definition of libel and to curtail protections against mainstream press and other outlets who happen to be critical of Ron DeSantis. So now let's get to more of Brodeur and exactly the reasons that he's apparently going so hard after blogs. Turns out there's a little bit of a history. Last fall, while facing a difficult re-election campaign in an increasingly Democratic area of Central Florida, Brodeur, whose time in office has been embroiled in scandal, had actually turned to attacking the Orlando Sentinel as a means to fundraise. And this is after reporting from the Orlando Sentinel, as well as numerous other smaller publications, including a Substack and blogs, that have talked about the fact that he was involved in a scheme, allegedly, to funnel illegal campaign contributions to his campaign. Oops. Now, people that were connected with this ghost candidate scheme to help his campaign ended up getting sentenced. One of them included a Seminole County GOP chairman. So, I mean, this is actually pretty big news, right? Now, according to other reports, Brodeur was also involved in a bad economic development deal. Well, bad for who? Well, you'll see. Now, there's a company that he co-founded with another state lawmaker, and in this deal, they took a multi-million-dollar grant from one of the poorest counties in Florida. So they're, taking this grant for a company. The only issue is the company didn't exist at the time they applied for the grant. Okay, so it didn't exist at the time, but they eventually formed the company, right? And then the company subsequently went out of business. Now, that deal actually ended up sparking 2 criminal investigations, but led to no charges. It also led to a damning grand jury report, several critical audits, and years of litigation, some of which might still be ongoing. And at the end of the day, Brodeur allegedly pocketed at least $60,000 in cash right into his pocket. Now, a lot of this stuff was covered by smaller blogs, publications, Substack, but also in places like the Tampa Bay Times and, yes, the Orlando Sentinel. So I think it's pretty obvious why this person seems to be targeting independent journalists. Yeah, they have a history of finding out his dirty laundry and getting him in trouble. He don't like that. He don't like that at all. Now, here's the irony, right? And this guy's a Republican, and Ron DeSantis has also, been targeting the press, going after the press in Florida. And so they're kind of on the same side. Now, or actually they are on the same side. And by the way, when asked about this, his office refused to comment on whether or not he supported this piece of legislation. Interesting. But again, the irony here. Fox News and Murdoch-owned media entities are, that was a weird Freudian slip, we're pushing DeSantis as a 2024 nominee. They still are, right? So I've noticed that. We've all noticed that. Okay. But what I didn't know about that is that DeSantis is also being heavily promoted by a small set of GOP bloggers. Oh, interesting. According to the Daily Beast, these bloggers are the ones that DeSantis has used to break stories, shape narratives, and get out his personal message. Now, those websites include the Florida Standard, the Floridian, and the Florida Voice. All entities with little or no long-term involvement in covering Florida government and elections, many of them just recently materializing in recent years, coinciding with the rise of Ron DeSantis in Florida. Now, the reason that this is ironic, again, this rule, would it not target them as well? I mean, of course, they are bloggers and they're likely being paid by somebody. Who are they being paid by to blog in favor of DeSantis? Will we ever know? Will they ever pass this law? And if that's the case, how would they enforce it? How could they enforce it And to whom would they enforce it on? Knowing Florida, I would assume that these websites, these blogs, I should say, will likely ignore them, these outlets. They'll be excluded from the rules. But that's just my speculation on that. As is my speculation that I believe that Ron DeSantis is an authoritarian. I do not believe him or his administration, Republicans in Florida, believe in the First Amendment or the Constitution. They do not believe in freedom. I mean, there's been insane stories coming out of Florida Republicans for a while now. And it's not just like Florida man story. No, this is one of the last stories that I did about Florida is one Republican that is trying to ban the opposition party. And you combine that with, of course, all the attacks on LGBTQ plus Americans, African Americans, trans people. Florida is basically on the fast track to becoming Hungary, which, again, is run by a literal fascist, Viktor Orban, who has been speaking to American media figures and politicians, going to Republican events, and teaching people on the right, this is how you take over the country. Are we seeing that playbook happening right here? Very likely. Very likely. Orban also had been speaking to Tucker Carlson. And so look, overall, the right wing in Florida, and I think in many other places, but specifically in Florida right now, seems like they want fascism. And with DeSantis in power, they're able to enact this. They essentially do have one-party rule. Part of fascism is restricting the information that people are able to receive and consume. What they're doing is political correctness. Again, going back to the ironic part, I thought they're supposed to hate political correctness. No. And by the way, I mean politically correct in the way that for the government, in this case, the DeSantis administration, wanting to make sure that any information comes out is politically correct, that looks good on his administration. That's exactly what this is. Punishing blogs. And then, by the way, we have labeled this blog, and we have found out that they get paid by this and this and this, which is connected to this, and this connected to this, this connected to that. And obviously, this must be fake news. Pushed by George Soros. You know that's what's going to happen. Again, this is incredibly dangerous. Now, I tell you that this does not pass constitutional muster, but I have this fear that that somehow this gets passed, gets challenged, lower court, maybe filled with members of the far right, end up kicking it up to the Supreme Court, who then says, oh, totally fine. Look, I don't know if it's going to get that far. Maybe I'm just slippery, doing this slippery slope fallacy. And I don't know. It is a fear that I have, which it would, again, destroy completely the freedom of the press. I hope that it won't get anywhere near that. But again, I do not trust the judiciary. And you can plainly see from efforts like these that there is a fascist movement in this country that is continuing to try to attain more and more power and curtail the rights of anyone who will challenge them.